Yes, we're seeing a worrying trend right now in the automotive industry. We're seeing a lot of car manufacturers putting out great innovative products with new technology, interesting drivetrains, more efficient, better performing. But there's a catch. They're created with tons of problems, issues, recalls, warranty claims. National Highway Transportation Safety Administration is holding a lot of these new manufacturers to task. I mean, it doesn't take very long, a quick Google search, and you'll find which brands are clearly having major problems. They put out a new vehicle, all of a sudden they have an engine issue, or there's a chronic gearbox problem, or some recall that means that they can't safely operate that vehicle. I mean, for example, we look at Honda. Well, now they've got this issue with programming and some of their fuel systems, vehicles shutting off. They've also had some issues with their rod bearings, blowing bottom end of their engines. Toyota, their new V35A, you know, that new 3.4 liter V6, it's turbocharged. They've replaced the 5.7 in some models, and now they're putting in this new Turbo 6, and they're having lots of issues. All kinds of main bearing problems. Honda, Toyota having issues. General Motors, 877,000 L87 engines. Why? Bad rod bearing problems. That's going to cost them a fortune. Every time you're talking about a car manufacturer having engine issues, it generally means they're going to be spending millions, if not billions of dollars rectifying some of these issues. Think about the likes of Hyundai and Kia. Their Theta 2 engines, they're still not out of the woods. Customers, I know all kinds of people that have reached out to me. I know people personally that have owned vehicles like that with some of the Theta 2 engines that they've waited for engine replacements, and in many cases, because they didn't follow the strict list of criteria and the caveats, they all of a sudden don't qualify and don't even get an engine. There's lots of people that have complained that they're still waiting, or they're even on their second engine and they're having problems. This is getting terrifying. A lot of these manufacturers are having failures of transmission CVTs. Many of these are, whether they're recall issues or whether they're just major warranty claims and they just make a radar. You know, there's clearly issues with bulletins. Ford dropping valves on their 2.7 and 3 liter EcoBoost V6 engines. Yes, Ford's having a lot of problems. How about their 1.5 turbo 3-cylinder engines in their EcoBoosts? Yeah, you'll find some of those in vehicles like the Escape. And realistically, what's going on is they're dumping fuel, they're cracked fuel injectors, and now there's a recall for that. But how long do you have to wait for that to get resolved? Because even the initial recommendation by Ford was just to put in a patch, a software patch, to identify when a pressure drop when you actually lose the fuel. What good is that? You're going to dump gas on the ground because they were going to put a little trough, it's going to collect it and funnel it into a spot and detect a pressure drop. That's sad. NHTSA wasn't satisfied with that, and neither should you. But it feels like it's hitting almost every single car manufacturer, from Toyota to Stellantis to Ford to General Motors, you name it, Honda, they're all seeing it. Korean cars, Hyundai, Kias, every brand seems to be going through some kind of growing pains. And what is it? It's all for the sake of saving money, trimming costs, whether they're outsourcing, going to supply chain, getting lower grade of product. Maybe their engineering isn't quite up to snuff. Maybe they're tight tolerances. Maybe they're trying to do too much with too little. In other words, you know, where they maybe had a V6, now they're going with a turbo 3-cylinder. These engines are working harder. The technology is too complicated. And all of this culminating into a big soupy mess where car brands just don't have the reliability that they once had. The quality feels like it's going down. Yeah, in a lot of ways, the quality's nice. You know, the fit and finish looks nice. The technology works nice when it's all working. But it feels like a lot of these brands, something is missing. There's an X factor of reliability that seems to be going out the window. And where they're saving costs on, you know, like GM, and they're not putting bolts in to hold their doors in anymore, they're using glue to hold their door frames together. So they're saving costs there. A lot of brands are looking at saving costs. You know, even ashtrays in a lot of vehicles, General Motors, instead of using paint inside the ashtray, they were using nothing. They were basically eliminating paint coating. So a lot of brands are looking at trimming costs in different ways. And while some of it is meaningless and it really doesn't impact you or I, the buyer, unfortunately, there are times when it does. When some of those costs go into engine parts, plastic oil pans, plastic components under the engine compartment? How about water pumps that have plastic impellers and plastic housings? Those start to twist and warp and leak and crack, and then we face the heat. See, that's not just beginning and ending with the consumer or the brand. We all wear it. The reputation hits the brand, but we end up eating the costs outside of warranty. And unfortunately, a lot of these parts are built to last and sustain a certain amount of cycles, a certain amount of operations, and a certain amount of miles. And most of them are designed by engineers who are smarter than you and I. And a lot of them will only last for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden, coincidentally, things start to dribble and leak. And then there's a seep and there's a leak and there's something that lets go, or there's a new check engine light. Well, that all happens for a reason. And it feels like designed obsolescence is part of it. Seems like cost savings is another part of it. Ultimately, failures are growing. We're seeing more engine failures. We're seeing more transmission failures. We're seeing big catastrophic failures where maybe we never saw that before. Now, none of us are probably going to feel sorry for any of these car brands. I mean, poor little rich billionaire, right? I mean, ultimately, they're making money hand over fist. And during, 2020, 21, they were printing money with market adjustment fees, cost increases, jacking up prices, sticker prices were going up. And inflation wasn't the storyline. They used that as a bit of a story to convince us and justify it. But let's face it, even with increased wages in UAW frontline workers, VP increases, CEO wages, all of that incorporated, they were still making money hand over fist. Now all of a sudden they got too comfortable. They had to become more competitive. Now they have to find ways to trim costs to become more effectively competitive. But we're now starting to feel the burn. We're seeing more failures. Ford blowing valves, dropping engines, Ram engines. We're seeing problems, of course, with Jeeps. We're seeing problems with Hondas and Toyotas. And all these engines are costing money. Now, none of us are really too worried about the brands because ultimately we pay a lot of money. We expect these brands to last. The sad part is they're really not. And these manufacturers are hoping that they can skate through a lot of these warranty periods and get through without having any major issue. But every once in a while, a big one hits. For example, the V6 at Toyota. That one didn't make it through. And now 102,000 vehicles are impacted by that new 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. Same with the General Motors and the L87. Almost 1 million customers are going to be driving around in vehicles that are ticking time bombs. This is a sad state and a world we're in today. But all of these shortcomings, all of these shortcuts, all of these efforts to try to trim costs are all mounting to end up ultimately costing these manufacturers even more, where they might only make 10% on, a 5%, 10%, maybe 12% margin on the sale price of every one of these new vehicles. All it takes is one bad engine and they've blown their profits. Hence, you get an entire production run now with bad engines, 100,000 vehicles, 1 million vehicles, 1.4 million vehicles in Hondas, and 3 million vehicles in Hyundais and Kias. You start to see how that can mount and add up. All of a sudden, lo and behold, their profits go out the window. Well, none of us feel sorry for them because ultimately they made their bed. Now they're gonna lie in it. But it does make you wonder, to what end do these car manufacturers get into where they think that they can get through, build something on the cheap and dirty, but now all of a sudden they're having to pay the piper? I'd like to hear your thoughts down below, everybody. Do you feel sorry for these car brands? And do you feel the overall quality is taking a major hit? From my seat, from my perspective, it certainly feels that way. In a lot of these vehicles, they're nice, they have nice tech, they drive nice, they're even safer than they've ever been. But it feels like there's an overgrowing number of failures that I've never seen like this. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. Be sure to check out that video. Some of the most reliable vehicles you can possibly get, you probably want to see that. Because if you're shopping, you don't want to have one of those problematic units. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.